Karen was the kind of neighbor everyone noticed, not always for good reasons. She lived in a big house at the end of the cul-de-sac, with perfectly trimmed hedges and a shiny mailbox that gleamed in the sunlight. But behind her polished exterior was a personality that often rubbed people the wrong way. Karen wasn't exactly rude, but she had a knack for testing boundaries. Whether it was borrowing tools without asking or assuming she could park in other people's driveways, Karen acted like the rules didn't apply to her. Tom, on the other hand, preferred a quieter life. He kept to himself most of the time, tending to his garden or tinkering with projects in his shed. His shed was modest, nothing fancy, but it served its purpose. It stored his lawnmower, some tools, and a few odds and ends he'd collected over the years. Outside the shed, there was an old electrical outlet mounted on the wall. Tom rarely used it, so it stayed covered with a plastic flap to keep out dust and rain. One sunny afternoon, while watering his plants, Tom noticed something unusual. The door to his shed was slightly ajar. At first, he thought maybe he'd forgotten to close it properly earlier that morning. But when he went inside to check, nothing seemed out of place. Everything was where it should be, except for one thing. The plastic flap covering the outdoor outlet was flipped open, and there were faint scuff marks on the ground nearby, as if someone had dragged something heavy across the dirt. Curious, Tom decided to keep an eye on things. Over the next few days, he started noticing patterns. Every now and then, the shed door would be left slightly open again, and the outlet flap would be flipped up. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tom peeked through his living room window and saw Karen wheeling her golf cart toward his property. She parked it near the shed, plugged the charger into his outlet, and casually walked back to her house as if it were no big deal. At first, Tom wasn't sure how to feel about this. Maybe Karen thought it was okay because they were neighbors, or perhaps she assumed he wouldn't mind since the outlet wasn't being used for anything important. Whatever the reason, Tom knew deep down that what she was doing wasn't right. It wasn't just about the electricity itself. It was the principle of the matter. If Karen wanted to charge her golf cart, she should have asked permission or found another solution. Using his property without even a word felt disrespectful. As the days passed, Tom's initial confusion turned into irritation. He began to wonder how long this had been going on. Had Karen been using his outlet for weeks, months? The thought gnawed at him. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the evidence was hard to ignore. Each time he found the shed door ajar or the outlet uncovered, his frustration grew. Something had to change. But what? Little did Karen know, her actions were about to set off a chain reaction. Tom wasn't the type to confront people aggressively, but he also wasn't someone who let others take advantage of him without consequence. Quietly, he started thinking of ways to handle the situation. After all, sometimes the best solutions are the ones that make people realize their mistakes without causing unnecessary drama. And Tom, well, he was just getting started. Tom knew he couldn't let Karen's behavior continue unchecked. He decided it was time to address the issue directly, hoping a calm conversation would resolve things. After all, maybe Karen simply hadn't realized how her actions were affecting him. With that thought in mind, Tom walked over to her house one afternoon, determined to keep things polite and straightforward. Karen answered the door with a bright smile, as though she'd been expecting company. "Oh, hi, Tom," she chirped, leaning casually against the doorway. Her tone was friendly, but Tom noticed the way she tilted her head slightly, almost like she was preparing for some kind of negotiation. He took a deep breath and dove right in. "Hey, Karen," he began, forcing a small smile. "I've noticed something lately, and I wanted to talk to you about it." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "It seems like you've been using the outlet in my shed to charge your golf cart. Is that right?" For a split second, Karen's expression faltered. Her eyebrows twitched upward, and her lips pressed into a thin line. But just as quickly, her confident demeanor returned. "Oh, that," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Yeah, I've been plugging it in there sometimes. It's no big deal, is it? I mean, it's not like you're even using that outlet anyway. Tom blinked, caught off guard by her casual attitude. He had expected at least a hint of remorse or an apology, but instead, Karen acted as though what she was doing was completely normal. Well, he replied, trying to stay calm, it's not really about whether I'm using it or not. It's more about courtesy. If you need to charge your cart, maybe we could figure out another solution. Karen crossed her arms and leaned back against the doorframe, her smile tightening ever so slightly. Courtesy, she echoed, raising an eyebrow. Tom, come on. It's just a little electricity. You won't even notice it's gone. Besides, it's not like I'm draining your whole house or anything. Her dismissive tone made Tom's frustration bubble beneath the surface, but he forced himself to remain composed. I understand it's not a huge amount of power, he said slowly, but it's still my property. And if I had known you needed to use the outlet, I would have been happy to discuss it. That's all I'm saying. Karen sighed dramatically, as if Tom were making a mountain out of a molehill. Okay, fine, she said, rolling her eyes. If it's such a big deal to you, I'll try to find another way. But honestly, Tom, you're blowing this way out of proportion. Tom nodded, sensing that pushing further wouldn't help. Thanks for understanding, he said, though he wasn't entirely convinced Karen meant what she said. As he turned to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that their conversation hadn't resolved anything. In fact, Karen's lack of accountability only fueled his determination to put an end to the situation once and for all. Back at home, Tom sat on his porch, staring at the shed in the distance. He replayed the conversation in his mind, analyzing every word Karen had said, or rather, hadn't said. There had been no apology, no acknowledgement that she might have crossed a line. Instead, she'd brushed him off as though his concerns were trivial. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became. Karen wasn't going to stop unless he took matters into his own hands. And so, an idea began to form in Tom's mind. If Karen refused to respect his boundaries, then he would have to enforce them himself, in a way that left no room for misunderstanding. Whatever happened next, Tom was certain of one thing. Karen wouldn't see it coming. Tom spent the rest of the evening thinking about how to handle Karen's behavior. He didn't want to escalate things unnecessarily, but he also knew that simply talking to her hadn't worked. She had brushed him off with a carefree attitude, as if his concerns were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Tom realized he needed a solution that would send a clear message without causing unnecessary drama or giving Karen any reason to accuse him of being unreasonable. The next morning, while sipping his coffee on the porch, inspiration struck. What if he could make it impossible for Karen to use his outlet without realizing she was the one causing the problem? A clever idea began to take shape in his mind. After finishing his coffee, Tom headed to the local hardware store, where he browsed through shelves filled with gadgets and tools. Eventually, he found exactly what he was looking for: a programmable timer switch. Back at home, Tom got to work. He carefully installed the timer on the outlet in his shed, making sure everything was secure and functioning properly. The device was small and unassuming, blending seamlessly with the rest of the setup. Once it was in place, Tom programmed it to allow power to flow for exactly 3 seconds before cutting off completely. Anyone attempting to use the outlet wouldn't get enough time to charge anything substantial, like a golf cart battery. As he tested the system, Tom couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. If Karen tried to plug in her cart again, she'd quickly discover that something wasn't working right. The beauty of the plan was that it didn't involve confrontation or accusations. Instead, it relied on logic and subtlety. If Karen questioned him later, Tom could honestly say he had no idea why the outlet wasn't holding a charge. It was just faulty timing after all. With the timer in place, Tom sat back and waited. He kept an eye on his shed from the comfort of his living room, occasionally glancing out the window to see if Karen would show up. Sure enough, by late afternoon, he spotted her strolling toward his property with her usual air of entitlement. She parked her golf cart near the shed, plugged in the charger, and walked away without a second thought. Tom watched silently, his heart racing with anticipation. He wondered how long it would take Karen to realize something was wrong. Would she notice immediately, or would she assume the issue lay elsewhere? Either way, he knew this was only the beginning. The timer was set, and the game was officially on. Over the next few hours, Tom kept himself busy around the house, resisting the urge to peek outside too often. He wanted to give Karen enough time to figure out that her golf cart wasn't charging properly. When evening rolled around, he finally allowed himself a small smile. No matter how Karen reacted, one thing was certain: she wouldn't be able to ignore the problem forever. And when she did confront him, Tom would be ready, with a perfectly innocent explanation and a well-timed shrug. The next morning, Tom woke up early, his curiosity buzzing like static electricity. He wanted to see how Karen would react when she discovered her golf cart hadn't charged overnight. Quietly sipping his coffee, he positioned himself near the window with a clear view of his shed. And sure enough, it wasn't long before Karen appeared. She walked briskly toward the shed, her confident stride suggesting she had no idea what awaited her. Dressed in her usual bright, polished outfit, she looked every bit the picture of someone who expected things to go her way. Without hesitation, she unplugged the charger from the outlet and checked her golf cart's battery display. For a moment, she froze, her face twisting into an expression of confusion. The screen showed the same low charge as the day before, no progress at all. Tom couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction as he watched her reaction. Karen tapped the display a few times, as though willing it to change. When that didn't work, she plugged the charger back into the outlet and waited, arms crossed, tapping her foot impatiently. Seconds ticked by, but nothing happened. The cart remained stubbornly uncharged. Frowning, she unplugged the charger again, inspected the cord, and then tried plugging it in one more time. Still nothing. Karen stood there for a moment, staring at the outlet as if it had personally betrayed her, her brow furrowed deeper with each passing second. Finally, she muttered something under her breath, probably not very complimentary, and stomped back toward her house, leaving the golf cart behind. Tom leaned back in his chair, suppressing a grin. Phase 1 of his plan was working perfectly. But Karen wasn't one to give up easily. Later that afternoon, she returned to the shed, determination written all over her face. This time, she brought along a small toolkit, clearly intending to troubleshoot the problem herself. Tom watched with growing amusement as she fiddled with the outlet cover, examined the wiring, and even tested the charger on her cart's battery directly. Nothing seemed amiss, at least, not to her untrained eye. But the result was always the same. The cart refused to charge. By her third attempt, Karen's frustration had reached new heights. She paced around the shed, muttering loudly enough for Tom to hear fragments of her complaints. "This doesn't make any sense," she huffed, kicking at a pebble near the shed door. "It was fine before. What's going on here?" Tom stayed out of sight, letting her stew in her own confusion. He knew better than to intervene now. The longer Karen struggled to figure out the issue, the more likely she'd start questioning her own actions. And while part of him felt a twinge of guilt for making her so flustered, another part reminded him that this was entirely her doing. If she hadn't been using his outlet without permission, none of this would have happened. As the sun began to set, Karen finally gave up for the day. She left the golf cart parked near the shed once again, its charger dangling uselessly from the side. Walking back to her house, she shot a suspicious glance toward Tom's windows, as though suspecting he might be watching her. Little did she know, he was watching, but from a safe distance, where he could enjoy the show without getting involved. That night, as Tom sat on his porch reflecting on the day's events, he realized something important. Karen's confusion wasn't just amusing. It was also teaching her a lesson. Every failed attempt to charge her cart forced her to confront the reality of her actions. Whether she admitted it or not, she was starting to realize that her free ride, literally, had come to an end. And as far as Tom was concerned, that was exactly how things should be. By the third day, Karen's frustration had transformed into outright suspicion. She wasn't one to let things slide, especially when they inconvenienced her. The golf cart issue had become personal now, a challenge she couldn't ignore. Tom could tell from the way she stalked around her property, glancing periodically at his shed, that she was piecing together her own version of events. And unfortunately for Tom, he suspected he was at the center of her growing conspiracy theory. Karen didn't waste any time airing her grievances. That afternoon, she marched over to Tom's house with a determined look on her face. He was in the middle of pruning some bushes in his front yard when he heard her sharp voice calling out to him. "Tom," she barked, striding up the driveway like a woman on a mission. "We need to talk." Tom straightened up slowly, brushing dirt off his hands as he turned to face her. "Oh, hey, Karen," he said casually, though his pulse quickened slightly. "What's up?" "It's your outlet," she snapped, pointing an accusatory finger toward the shed. "There's something wrong with it. My golf cart won't hold a charge anymore, and I know it's not my equipment. Did you do something to it?" Tom raised his eyebrows, feigning surprise. "Do something to it? Like what?" he asked innocently. Karen planted her hands on her hips, her expression hardening. "I don't know. Maybe tampered with it. Sabotaged it. It worked fine before, but now it cuts off after just a few seconds. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Tom shook his head, keeping his tone calm and measured. "Honestly, Karen, I haven't touched it. If there's an issue, maybe it's something with the wiring or the circuit breaker. I can take a look later if you want, but I'm not sure what I'd find." Karen narrowed her eyes, clearly unconvinced. "Funny how this started happening right after our little chat," she muttered, almost to herself. Then louder, she added, "You're telling me it's just a coincidence?" "Hey, I'm not saying anything," Tom replied with a shrug. "But if you think I messed with your cart, then maybe you should check your charger again, or call an electrician. They'd probably figure it out faster than I could." Karen huffed, crossing her arms tightly across her chest. For a moment, it seemed like she might argue further, but instead, she spun on her heel and stormed back to her house. Tom watched her go, feeling the mix of relief and amusement. He knew she wouldn't let this drop easily, but at least she hadn't cornered him into admitting anything. Word of their standoff spread quickly through the neighborhood. Neighbors began whispering about the ongoing feud between Karen and Tom. Some sympathized with Tom, agreeing that Karen had brought this on herself by using his property without permission. Others found humor in the situation, chuckling at the cleverness of Tom's solution. A few even joked that Karen deserved a taste of her own medicine after years of taking advantage of everyone else. Karen, however, became increasingly paranoid. Convinced that Tom was behind the problem, she started leaving her golf cart parked conspicuously near his driveway, as if daring him to mess with it again. She also made frequent trips to the shed, sometimes standing there for minutes at a time, staring at the outlet like it held all the answers. Tom noticed her behavior but stayed cool, avoiding direct confrontation. He knew the longer Karen focused on him, the less likely she'd consider the real reason for her troubles, her own actions. Despite the tension, Tom couldn't deny that the situation had its perks. Watching Karen squirm was oddly satisfying, and it reinforced his belief that standing up for himself, albeit creatively, was worth the effort. Still, he wondered how long this game of cat and mouse would last. Would Karen eventually catch on to the timer? Or would she continue chasing shadows, refusing to admit fault? As the days passed, Tom decided to sit tight and see how things played out. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: Karen wasn't going to give up without a fight. As the days turned into a week, Karen's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She had always been the type to command attention in the neighborhood, but now she seemed consumed by her vendetta against Tom and his mysterious outlet. Her golf cart became a symbol of her frustration, parked conspicuously near Tom's driveway, as if to provoke him. Every morning, she would march over to the shed, plug in the charger, and wait, only to be met with the same disappointing result. The cart refused to charge. Neighbors began to take notice of the spectacle. Some found it hard to suppress their laughter when they saw Karen pacing around the shed, muttering under her breath or glaring at Tom's house. Others felt a twinge of sympathy for her, but not enough to intervene. After all, most people in the neighborhood had experienced Karen's knack for bending rules to suit her needs. This time, it seemed she had finally pushed someone too far. Tom, meanwhile, tried to keep a low profile. He went about his daily routine as usual, tending to his garden, fixing things around the house, and occasionally sneaking glances at Karen from his window. He knew her antics were bound to escalate, but he also understood that staying calm was key. If he reacted too strongly, he risked giving himself away, or worse, sparking an even bigger confrontation. One afternoon, Karen decided to take matters into her own hands. Armed with a notebook and pen, she began documenting every detail of her attempts to charge the golf cart. She timed how long it took for the power to cut off, exactly 3 seconds, and jotted down notes about the outlet's appearance. At one point, she even borrowed a multimeter from a neighbor, claiming she needed it for a quick project. But no matter what she tested or recorded, the results were always the same. The outlet simply wouldn't cooperate. Her growing obsession didn't go unnoticed. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, sharing updates on the latest chapter of the feud. One elderly couple joked that Karen should consider starting a detective agency, given how much effort she was putting into solving the mystery. Another neighbor quipped that Tom deserved a medal for his patience and creativity. Even the mail carrier got in on the gossip, shaking his head as he delivered letters. "That Karen sure knows how to stir up trouble," he said to Tom during a brief chat. "Hope you're ready for round 2. Despite the mounting pressure, Karen still refused to admit fault. Instead, she doubled down on her belief that Tom was sabotaging her. Late one evening, she knocked on his door again, this time holding her notebook like evidence in a courtroom case. "I've been tracking everything," she announced, thrusting the pages toward him. "And I know something's off. The outlet works for exactly 3 seconds before cutting off. That can't be a coincidence." Tom glanced at the notebook, then back at her. 3 seconds, huh?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "That does sound odd. Maybe there's a short in the wiring or something. Like I said before, I haven't touched it, but if you want, I can call an electrician tomorrow." Karen scowled, clearly dissatisfied with his response. "Fine," she snapped. "But if it turns out you've done something to it, don't think I won't say anything. People are watching." With that, she stormed off, leaving Tom standing in his doorway, suppressing a grin. He knew Karen was grasping at straws, but part of him admired her persistence. Still, he couldn't help but wonder how long she'd keep this up. Surely, she'd tire of the game eventually, or realize that the problem wasn't with the outlet at all. Over the next few days, Karen's efforts began to taper off. Whether it was exhaustion, embarrassment, or sheer stubbornness, she stopped visiting the shed as frequently. The golf cart remained parked near Tom's driveway, gathering dust, a silent reminder of the battle she'd waged and ultimately lost. For Tom, it was a quiet victory. He hadn't raised his voice or caused a scene. Instead, he'd let Karen's own actions lead her to the truth. The neighborhood buzz died down as well, though whispers lingered here and there. People moved on to other topics, grateful for the entertainment while it lasted. As for Tom, he removed the timer discreetly, knowing it had served its purpose. Justice had been served, not through confrontation, but through cleverness and patience. And as he sat on his porch one evening, sipping tea and watching the sunset, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. Sometimes, the best solutions are the ones that teach lessons without saying a word. Weeks passed, and life in the neighborhood returned to its usual rhythm. The feud between Tom and Karen had faded into the background, becoming nothing more than a funny story shared over coffee or during evening walks. Karen no longer visited Tom's shed, and her golf cart remained parked in her driveway, untouched. It was clear that she had finally given up on trying to charge it at his expense, but not without leaving behind a trail of lingering tension. For Tom, the situation had been resolved quietly and effectively. He never admitted to installing the timer, and Karen never directly accused him of tampering with the outlet again. But both of them knew the truth. Karen had been caught red-handed, and Tom had handled the matter with subtlety and wit. Though their interactions remained polite on the surface, there was an unspoken understanding between them, a mutual acknowledgement that boundaries had been crossed and lessons had been learned. The rest of the neighborhood, however, couldn't resist discussing what had happened. Some viewed Tom as a quiet hero who stood up to Karen's antics in a way that avoided unnecessary drama. Others saw humor in how Karen's stubbornness had backfired so spectacularly. "She brought this on herself," one neighbor remarked during a casual chat. "If she hadn't been using his outlet without asking, none of this would have happened." Another chimed in. "Tom didn't even have to yell or argue. He just outsmarted her. You've got to respect that." Karen, for her part, seemed to retreat slightly from the spotlight she once craved. She stopped borrowing things without permission, at least for a while, and became more cautious about stepping on other people's toes. Whether this change was genuine or merely temporary remained to be seen, but it was enough to ease some of the tension in the community. Her obsession with the outlet fiasco appeared to fade, though Tom occasionally caught her glancing at his shed with narrowed eyes. He suspected she still harbored suspicions but lacked the energy, or evidence, to pursue them further. One day, Tom noticed something new in Karen's driveway, a solar-powered charging station. It was sleek and modern, clearly expensive, and positioned prominently where everyone could see it. At first, he thought it might be a coincidence, until he spotted Karen smirking as she plugged her golf cart into it. There was no mistaking the message she was sending. "I don't need your outlet anymore." Tom chuckled to himself, amused by her passive-aggressive move. If anything, it only reinforced how seriously she had taken their little standoff. Despite the lingering awkwardness, Tom couldn't deny that the experience had taught him something valuable. Standing up for himself didn't always require confrontation. Sometimes creativity and patience were far more effective tools. By handling the situation with tact, he had sent a clear message without causing lasting damage to their relationship or stirring up unnecessary conflict in the neighborhood. As time went on, the story of Karen and the golf cart charger became a favorite topic at block parties and barbecues. People laughed about the timer, speculated about Karen's reaction, and marveled at Tom's ingenuity. Even Karen joined in occasionally, albeit reluctantly, brushing off the incident with a forced laugh and a dismissive comment. "It's water under the bridge," she'd say, though her tight smile suggested otherwise. In the end, the saga served as a reminder to everyone involved about the importance of respecting boundaries and the power of subtle retaliation. For Tom, it was a personal victory. For Karen, it was a humbling lesson. And for the neighborhood, it was simply another chapter in the ongoing drama of living side by side. Life moved forward, as it always does, but the memory of those 3 seconds lingered, a testament to the cleverness of one man and the consequences of taking something that wasn't yours.